got to watch my time, so I'm going to whiz through a few things shortly. Okay, say if we're doing a unit on pets. Now, what are some pets? Quickly. We're going to do this very quick. Cat. Dog. What? Chicken. Any other pets? Sorry? A hamster, yeah. Okay. All right. Rabbits, and so on. Birds, and, okay. Reptiles, sometimes I've got pet snakes. Not that I have a pet snake, but... Okay, so if we were to develop a unit on pets, we may want to then build up the conceptual understanding of, okay, well, what are the characteristics of some of these pets? So if I ask the question, now two common pets are cats and dogs. So just very quickly do a little exercise. This is in terms of the thinking part, compare and contrast. What's common to cats and dogs? 4 legs. Tail. Yep. Tail. Yep. What else? Sorry? Domesticated. What type of covering have they? Fur. Okay. Warm or cold-blooded? Warm. What type of animal? Cattle. Good. Okay. So there, that would go in the middle. So what's different about the two animals? Okay, one of them, for instance, a cat will go meow. Okay, make different sounds to a dog will go will bark. Okay. What else? One chases ball. Oh yeah, okay. You could. I mean, the dogs would chase the ball. You can train a dog to do that. Sometimes they say you can train cats, but maybe you can't. You can. There you go. Yeah. I think you can. Yeah. Again, depends on what type of cat you may have. Sorry? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and their vision's different. And also their tongue. If you had a cat with you, really like real rough, okay, and so on. So you can start to really look at the differences, and kids love doing that in terms of what's different about a cat and a dog and so forth. And you know, if we had time, I would get you to do the task, but I've actually done the answer for you. So if you look at the, the carnivorous. What's a carnivorous? What does carnivorous mean? Meat eating. Okay, so they're meat eating, 4-legged, they're mammals and they're furry. Cats are difficult to train. Not saying that can't train them, but they are difficult to train. They've got a rough tongue, whereas a dog's got a smooth tongue. Climbers, and dogs are swimmers. Cats don't like swimming. But some do. Yeah, and bark. Okay, so cat will purr. Now, a cat, and this is biologically, has a vertical iris, whereas a dog has a round iris. So that's in terms of difference. And cats have retractable claws. But certainly there's a bit of research, but that's certainly more of a high cognitive task in terms of trying to find the differences. And we're starting to sort of develop our understanding of what is a mammal, different types of mammals, as an example. Okay. So just to sum up, the children construct their own understanding from their own bits of experience in an attempt to organise the experience. By creatively and actively seeking to make sense of their own world, children are attempting to achieve the same types of things that the scientific and technological communities are attempting to do. So we often get our kids to classify. That's a scientific process. Imagination and creativity are all the core of the scientific processes of hypothesis formation. Now let's go back to what's an hypothesis? What is an hypothesis? An educated guess. Always simply guess. We hope it's educated, but yeah, in terms of we might say, and that builds from our own experiences trying to explain something. So we often go and test our hypothesis. So it has to be an educated guess, but it actually has to be testable. Well, okay, so we start to develop that. Okay, just to talk a little bit about how we may get kids to think about concepts a bit further. Use of humour, jokes is sometimes very useful. And for instance, if we look at this one here. A neutron walks into a bar, orders a beer and begins to open his wallet when the barman says, "For you, no charge." Now, you probably wouldn't get that unless you knew something about what a neutron was. So what do you need to know before this is amusing? Okay? So you need to know about, okay, here we've got the model of an atom. And so electrons are very small and revolve around the nucleus of an atom. At high speed, they have a negative charge. And you found this in your first week when you started to have a voltage across two ends of a wire, and what happened was current was pushed through. So we had electrons, because the electrons are on the surface of atoms, so the electrons were made to move along the conductor. Okay, protons are part of the nucleus, they have a positive charge. Neutrons are also part of the nucleus, they do not have a charge. So now this is funny, going back to the previous joke. What about this one? Two atoms bump into each other. "I think I've lost an electron," says one. "Are you sure?" asks the other. "I'm positive." Okay. I use this with my Year 9 class, so, you know, my students never really appreciated my sense of humour, but never mind. You may not either. But it just illustrates the point that we can use humour to get a concept across. Heard about the NASA restaurant on the moon? Great food, no atmosphere. Okay. So what do you need to know about that to be funny? So obviously you need to know that on the moon there's no atmosphere. Okay, so the thinking of children in the pre-operational, concrete operational stage of their cognitive development is dominated by observable features of events, objects and phenomena. So sometimes to understand something you need to move beyond the concrete, and that could be difficult for some concepts. But build on that, start with that will certainly help in terms of trying to get students to overcome their misconceptions. And that's what we're sort of leading into. Adults have the mental or cognitive capacity to manipulate concepts, abstract ideas, and so on. Children often focus on one identifiable aspect of a particular... So we need to say that as we get older, we're able to sort of bring more ideas together from our experiences. So we need to be able to do that when we stage our learning. Okay, I'm just going to move a little bit further. You'll be able to come to these. You'll be able to see this on the. Because I want to move to. I'm just a bit short of time, and I want to make sure that I want to get to talk about cultural ways of knowing. So I'm just sort of quickly passing through these slides, and I want you to be able to look at that. And really, up to now, we're looking through a Western lens, and that's we start to look at a scientific view. That's the lens that we use in that thinking. But what we need to be aware of that there are other ways of knowing, and that's what I want to sort of move into. I mean, most of our thinking is based on Aristotle from the ancient Greeks, and that's where our Western civilization has come from. Okay, but there is certainly other knowings that's just as important. So I'm just going to move beyond. I'm going to pass through this, and I just want you to sort of, you can go through that. But what we're trying to do is see in the brain is to get all those things happening, and one way of doing that is by, if we start to look at, I think it's the next slide, looking at Vygotsky in terms of why he, in fact, when you've got putting kids together, sharing their experiences with another experience will help build that understanding. And you'll find that a lot of the work that you've been doing has been that process of you working with other members of your group, learning from each other. Okay, so in other words, we can, through language and culture, we can bring all that together. So I'm just sort of have a shared experience, and then by building that, it helps build up our understanding. So it goes back to the very beginning I talked about in terms of student support. learning. You really need to be able to orchestrate the lesson design which enables the students to talk to each other and then also to talk to you about ideas. Now, when we start to move to Indigenous ways of knowing, and really a lot of this not only relates to Aboriginal thinking, but we've also had, if you have to look around the globe, there is many Indigenous cultures around the world. First Nations, Canadians, First Nations, States, South America, Hawaii, Pacific Islands, the Ocean Islands in that. But also there are many other Indigenous peoples in the globe, even in Malaysia, Siberia, up north, Eskimos, Inuits, and so on. They're all important to draw on that knowledge base. But if we start to look at Aboriginal ways of knowing, spiritualism is very important. Their notion of land is very profound and it in fact plays a big part in their understanding. The other thing that plays a big part in it is this notion of collectiveness and the social learning, so that in terms of they work as a collective, not as individuals. So community is really important. We need to build on it. Whereas I think when we're talking Western society, we tend to be a bit more insular. We tend to be, and I'm generalising here, individualistic. Whereas if we look at some other cultures, they tend to be a lot more collective and group. The other thing is autonomy as a political affirmation, so that in terms of what that we mean by that is that individuals are given the opportunity to make the choice in terms of what they will support or not. So those things of spiritualism, collectivism and autonomy as a political affirmation are important when we think about giving voice to children, especially Aboriginal children, but also other cultural groups as well. So Aboriginal ways of knowing, if you start to think about Aboriginal pedagogy, there is a sense of, it connects very much with the way they've been brought up, and in terms of the way information is passed on from one generation to the other is through story. And in fact, I reflect on my own upbringing. I learned a hell of a lot, and I'm not Aboriginal, but I come from a Italian background. But so it's not only Aboriginal culture, a lot of other cultures too, which relate to storytelling. You know, I learned a hell of a lot from my father, stories he told me about growing up and the way he was people. So by oral history, passing information from one group to another is really important. So we really need to honour that more in the classroom, of being able, giving opportunities for kids to talk about what they know. In terms of, I've spent some time up in Berowra, and in fact from the 8th to the 13th of September I'm going back there for a week, working at Berowra Central. I've taken some of my students on the ORIC program, and some will be going to Perth. And we're going to spend a bit of time looking at cultural knowledge, or the knowledge that promotes the area. There are a number of language groups from that area. But there's a number of important sites. In fact, I'll be spending a little bit of time at Berowra and fish traps. Talking about more than 10,000 years old science. Designed to trap fish, technology, same before Europeans came to Australia. So that particular place, the Darling River, where we've got other rivers coming in together, it's an important part of New South Wales, and where some of these ideas have come from that particular area. One of the teachers, Missy Margaret Nichols, when I spent some time working with her, and we often would start a lesson along the river. And we would talk about the river and the rules that the classroom is associated with the river. And from that, story following a song line down the Darling River, so that it's really important that there is a lot of stories associated with that river and in terms of how it impacts on learning. So if we just knowledge about Aboriginal ways of learning come from river communities of land. So they have a real, those people that have grown up in those communities have a real good understanding of land in particular, but also in terms of the biology and the flora. They know a lot more about biology than I do. And often the kids would teach me. I think that's what we don't recognise, the fact that kids from their own experience, kids they spend their time interacting with the land. We've sort of taken it away from our children, very built up area where we don't have space. There's a real big move into learning and trying to set up these places where children can spend time outdoors. Certainly, I would encourage you people to think about how you can incorporate the environment for your lesson design. So, but in terms of learning, there are messages from stories, there's non-verbal messages, reflection, demonstration. A lot of kids learn from the elders, and they demonstrate and the kids watch and they learn that way. The cultural details of this journey cannot be shared here, but this is not the important part. The important part is the process, so that you can see from, if you start to look at some of those images, there is a whole range of different scientific concepts there. I don't know whether it's clear, but there's a bit of a rainbow in the centre there underneath where the bird is going down. I don't know if you can see a touch of that. But also in terms of the bird life, but also in terms of the land, drawing on that. So when we start to look at how we may teach Aboriginal children, so I think we may teach a lot of children. In fact, a lot of these things that I've got there is for only Aboriginal children. And you'll notice that often, I think when I first teach you last week, I very particular start off with talking about my very important. When you're working with it, they want to know where you're from, what you're doing. Certainly, it's all part of corporate management. Do you know anything about this politician framework? You would have done that in your did you do that? You know when I say the politician framework, do you know what I'm talking about? Intellectual quality, creating an okay. Good. There's some of those elements, narrative, authentic communication, those terms would have come across. Well, they're here. If you look at the politician framework, there are 18 elements. Here there are 8. In fact, they assume a couple of elements. So that when we're talking about connect through stories we share, there's a lot of connectedness, sense of communication, and narrative. They are 3 elements from the Employee Teaching Framework that also underpin 8 ways of learning, part of Aboriginal pedagogy. And I also I've worked for some years at Punchbowl Boys High School, and I worked with a lot of the parents and also a lot of the kids from the Middle Eastern background. And I found that through narrative, storytelling, very powerful strategy to use with those kids, with those boys in particular. I also worked for quite a few years at Bodyary High School, worked with a lot of Cambodian and Vietnamese children, and South American children. That school then, when I was teaching, had a very high cultural mix. So I found that what I'm saying to you now, in terms of my experience working with Aboriginal children and working in the country, it's not so much different to working with kids from Asia or from the Middle East or from South America. way of making them a bit more explicit. So they're the symbols that are used. We picture our pathways of knowledge, so through pictures and images. Images are extremely important. We seek to act, make and share without words, so body language, the way we communicate without words is so important. We keep and share knowledge with art and objects, so we draw on our history, but we also draw on our culture. We work with lessons from land and nature, so we all go out and spend some time outside the experience. If I was teaching an English lesson, I would go outside and get them to actually work in the environment, sort of as a way of stimulating them and thinking about things. I'm going for time. Okay. I'm going to go about another 3 or 4 minutes. Sorry? Okay, sorry. Just bear with me. I want to finish this before you leave because I've got the punchlines at the end. We put different ideas together and create new knowledge. We work from wholes to parts, watching and then doing. And again, this watching and doing is important. We model a lot of the thinking that happens in the classroom. And the important part is that we bring knowledge home to our mob. So when I worked at Punchbowl Boys, I worked with those boys to say, what happened there is that we've got a generation, a young generation, going back to an old way of generation, and it's so important for the boys to talk to their parents about what they're learning. We don't have those sorts of conversations so much, and it's harder now because I have at the dinner table, all mobile phones are off the table, off limits during time, and we've got to talk to each other. How was the day? And I know my advice to parents here, enforce that rule. It's so important. But also enforce it in the classroom if you can. Okay, there's Missy up in the corner there, but I haven't got time to go through, but you can see there's lots of images and pictures that's being used in the background there. There's also the use of Aboriginal words, language, so that make that connection. Spending a lot of time around the Berowina fish traps, and from that place, bringing it back into the classroom, very powerful. And so you can see in terms of the storylines, the visuals and so forth, very powerful ways in which of communicating with our kids. If we had time, which we haven't, okay, what you've got